somehow interact with each other, but only with the help of the greatest of all monads, with the help of God, who somehow organizes these monads into one system. And this organization, which is done by God, is called predetermined harmony. So God keeps all monads in harmony. Well, some monads, as for example human souls, can have free will and intelligence. So they can, like atoms of Epicurus, they have freedom. So they can somehow move or act in this or that direction, and in this way change the trajectory of the world and change future. So God knows how we'll act in this or that circumstance, and by this predetermined or prearranged harmony, he somehow neutralizes perhaps evil that we could have done by creating the situation when we are not capable of doing much evil. For example, you know that nuclear war hasn't yet started. Well, once when I was 5 years old, it was the Caribbean crisis, when the whole world was on the verge, on the threshold of nuclear war. But somehow Kennedy and Khrushchev at that time managed to find a compromise. So it means that, well, if Leibniz would just explain this, he would say that perhaps Khrushchev wanted the war, or perhaps Kennedy wanted the war, but Leibniz somehow arranged all circumstances that they were like it was impossible for them to start nuclear war, maybe out of fear, maybe because of there were some people who acted as intercessors or shuttle diplomats, like one of the intercessors was Pope John the 23rd, for example. There were others. So somehow the worst didn't happen. And according to Leibniz, this is always a principle. So God does not take freedom from monads, but somehow he arranges all the combination of monads in such a way as to achieve less possible evil and maximum of possible good. Well, we should remember that Leibniz was a great expert on finding maximums and minimums, because he was one of the inventors of calculus. And calculus affords us good technology or methodology to find maximums and minimums of functions. So if we just see this like set of all possible worlds as kind of a function of, say, evil or good, then we can sort of take a derivative of this function and find out when this derivative is equal to 0. So this will be the points when the function reaches its maximum or minimum, and then the God will choose the best possible world and all the minimum of evil in this world. So maybe these two parameters somehow coincide in one variant. So the variant of the best possible world is the same as the world with less possible evil. Okay, so, well, of course, evil, we do suffer. Yes, of course. Of course, he is not interested in sponsoring the life of disobedience, of course, but he sort of respects human freedom and somehow permits us to act maybe irresponsibly or disobediently, just to not to deprive us of our human dignity. Okay, so well, sometimes also when I'm dealing with my children, for example, or with my students, I allow freedom, because I don't want to sort of behave in such a way as to injure their sense of dignity. So by just my tone, which is like bossy or commanding or arrogant, so it's sometimes this way of attitude sort of injures my fellow creatures. So that's maybe God also is kind of a gentleman, and he sort of has and compassion, and also some estimation of our freedom and our dignity. Well, so whatever it is, we know that evil exists, and well, we'll later speak about the great controversy which happened already after Leibniz's death, when there happened a great earthquake in Lisbon in 1755, Lisbon earthquake, and so that was the pretext for Voltaire to sort of question this thesis of Leibniz, that we live in the best of all possible worlds. So Voltaire was at first a great fan of Leibniz and Newton, and he believed that this world is arranged in a finest possible way, sort of like we say fine-tuning. Okay, well, but then he got a little bit discouraged when he saw this Lisbon earthquake. Well, he was not an eyewitness, of course, but he understood, being a man of great imagination, he could understand the sufferings of the innocent victims. Most of them were innocent, because there were a lot of children who suffered and a lot of elderly people who were just helpless. So, well, of course, it was a severe blow also to human dignity and also to human, and it seemed that God is lacking of this compassion. So he's too severe to be called bountiful. Okay, so there was a kind of a question. I don't think that Voltaire had answers. He later wrote to Emperor Frederick II that he had no answers. He is always doubting. So he was we can say bewildered. Okay, so sometimes we also in our life, when we meet suffering, we meet evil somehow triumphant, we also can have some doubts or reservations. But still, maybe Leibniz, we shouldn't just imagine that Leibniz was somehow like an insensitive person and he didn't feel this evil in the world. Maybe Leibniz lived in the world which was more or less stable, but I don't think so, because Leibniz was a great connoisseur of history, because he wrote also books on history. So of course he could see how much evil and how much suffering there was in the history of mankind. But still he was optimistic. So we can call philosophy of Leibniz optimistic. Well, now a little bit after this introduction, a few words about his life. He was born in 1646 in Hannover. It was at that time independent state, which interestingly, which interestingly gave England the new dynasty, because King of Hanover, George I, or Georg, as he was called in German, was invited to the English throne. So this Hanover dynasty reigns till now. So Elizabeth, the queen which reigns now, Elizabeth II, is a direct descendant of this George I, who was Prince of Hanover and then became King of England. Well, so there was some connection, sort of Leibniz with England, but not so great as perhaps it can be imagined, because Leibniz was not invited to the court of George I and remained in Hanover, remained in Europe. He didn't move to Great Britain. Well, when Leibniz was a young man, he he made a tour of European capitals, and he met with a lot of people. First of all, he traveled to Paris. Unfortunately, it was in 1676. Unfortunately, he couldn't find René Descartes alive. René Descartes died in 1650, but there remained a lot of papers after the death of Descartes, which nobody could understand, and nobody even cared, perhaps, about them. And Leibniz was allowed to study in the library of Descartes and to just organize these papers, these remains of Descartes. And he found a very important document, which is called Private Thoughts, or it was written in Latin, Cogitationes privatae. Private. Well, excuse me for this Latin language, because I think I'm not snobbish. I just would like you to know some, well, these Latin expressions can serve as good indicators of scholarly literature about the philosophers. So if you just put Cogitationes privatae in double commas, so you will certainly find a scholarly book devoted to René Descartes, and perhaps they will tell you that these private thoughts were found by Leibniz. So Leibniz found them and published them. Now they are published in the full edition of René Descartes' works in French and Latin. This edition was made in the beginning of the 20th century and still is considered the best edition of René Descartes' works. It is now accessible online, so you can see it and use it. So it's very easy and free of charge. You can also see Cogitationes privatae in one of the 10 volumes of this edition. So this was his experience in Paris. Then he went to Holland, to the Hague, the city in Holland, where he met Benedict Spinoza. Spinoza was still alive. You remember we spoke about this meeting, and well, there was a interesting discussion, but there was a fundamental disagreement between Spinoza and Leibniz, because you know at that time Leibniz already was thinking in terms of these future monads. So he was a firm believer in independence of a human soul, and it's like isolation from all other souls, you see, and from all other world. You know, in Spinoza, things are directly in the opposite way. So with Spinoza, everything is connected with everything. Well, like in Indian philosophy, when you injure some person, you injure yourself. This is wisdom of the Indians. Maybe I don't know is there somebody from India now listening to me? I'm not sure. Nobody is from India. Or just Winnie left to the doctor, yes? So okay. Well, you can imagine that this so many Indians, yes, but can you confirm this Indian wisdom that when you injure a person, you somehow injure yourself? It's like a boomerang, okay? So this evil which you're doing to another creature somehow returns to you. This is the law of karma. Is it true or not? Karma,
Yeah,
yes.
true.
Okay, so if I injure a person, I'm not, I will be responsible for that, because it somehow will happen that this my deed will be retaliated on me, okay? So I will receive some, you understand, punishment. This is the law of karma, okay? So when I do some bad things, I sort of worsen my karma, okay? Is that true?
Yeah, it's true.
Yes.
Yeah, we
So
believe in
yes.
this. Yeah.
So here is Spinoza's attitude also, that here in this world everything is connected with everything. Well, and God is not isolated from the world. He is within the world, and in certain extent, well, and he can be called also the world itself. So the world itself and God are one, according to Spinoza. With Leibniz, it is quite the opposite. God is outside. He is the biggest, he is the infinite monad, the largest of all monads, and he is free to create, to choose between possible worlds. With Spinoza, such freedom is denied to God, because there is no opportunity or just no notion of possible world with Spinoza. Spinoza says there are no possible worlds. There's only one actual world in which we live. So it's fruitless to speak or to imagine some other worlds. So this is only one world. And from this follows that we cannot change anything here. So we cannot change this world by our, say, free action. So there are no free actions, because Spinoza was a logician, and of course he understood that if he allows some freedom for our actions or for God's actions, then this freedom would change the trajectory, sort of, or the future of the world. So every free act will somehow change the trajectory in which the world sort of evolves or proceeds. So we are like co-authors of this world. So for Spinoza, it was impossible, and he said that it was nonsensical, that a man can change the world. So, but if we cannot change the world so that we are not free, and that's then we cannot act in another way as in which we act. We can be granted only understanding of this circumstance. We should understand that we are not free and somehow sort of take it as it is, okay? Well, this is the only way to survive or to feel good in this world. And you remember I told you that he introduced this Latin expression, laetitia, which is Spinoza, laetitia, which is joy. joy in English. So in Latin, it's laetitia. So, well, Spinoza wrote in Latin, so this is the original of his work. So what is that laetitia, or what is that joy? This joy comes from understanding that we cannot change anything, that we have to take all the things as they are. So when we understand that, we are at peace, we have inner peace, and we have joy. Well, if I'm free, like Leibniz thought that I am also a monad, you are a monad, we are all monads, we have freedom. So if we are free, we have, of course, some obligations, and we have some burden on us, burden of sort of understanding the consequences of responsibility, burden of responsibility. We are responsible for our actions, okay? So from our actions can change the destinies of other people and our own destiny. So we can really change our karma, if we take an Indian expression, or we can change our destiny if we use a European expression. And so this, our freedom, of course, gives us a source of anxiety. So, for example, now I'm doing this lecture. Well, I cannot change the whole world because I think President Trump is not listening to me directly. So perhaps I can't influence world European figures or multimillionaires or other people in power like Bill Gates or say Zuckerberg. Well, but who knows? You see, you cannot know the result of your words. So when you are speaking publicly, you always are at certain tension. You always feel some responsibility. And you don't have this joy of which spoke Spinoza. No, the joy maybe comes after you finished your lecture, but while you are doing your lecture or doing any job, you are responsible, and you understand that you can make a mistake, perhaps a fatal mistake, irreversible mistake, and then that can spoil everything. For example, if you ride a car, I think some of you have driver's licenses, and they understand what is a responsibility one has if he's driving a car, especially when he has children in his car, for example. Well, he understands that one may be wrong movement or just a moment of say inattentiveness, inadvertence can lead to catastrophe, okay? So, but with Spinoza, there's no such worries, because everything is happening as it must happen, and it couldn't happen in any other way. So Spinoza says that we shouldn't shed tears, we shouldn't laugh, but we should understand. And from this understanding comes joy and peace of mind, okay? Well, with Leibniz, we have full responsibility. So we cannot say that, and that with this responsibility returns the idea of guilt and the idea of sin, okay? So with Leibniz was fully Orthodox Christian. Well, he was committed Christian throughout all his life. He was Protestant, but he was not this kind of Protestant who hates Catholics, for example. He understood the inner beauty of Catholic theology and borrowed much from it. And he was influenced by Catholic theologians like Spanish, for example, like Spanish theologian Francisco Suarez. who lived in the 16th century and the beginning of the 17th century. So Suarez was among those theologians who introduced this idea of human responsibility and the idea of free will acting as a free cause and changing the trajectory of the development of the world. So he was advocate of the opinion that there are infinite number of possible worlds which are all known to God, and God can select one of the worlds, but he knows while selecting one in which we live, real world, he knows now what happens in other worlds, so what could have happened if, for example, Adam was tempted directly by Satan and not through Eve. Well, this is the citation from Suarez. So this is another world, of course, the world which didn't happen, but God knows even what happened in this possible world. So this idea of possible worlds was taken from these scholastics, and that's why Leibniz had a great esteem of Catholic theology and wished to unite the unification of the churches. He thought that perhaps this schism between Protestants and Catholic was a tragic mistake which brought a lot of hardship and sorrow and disunited Europe, and he wanted to somehow sort of as you say, make a kind of a sanation, or cure, better say, cure this schism. Yes. So that was Leibniz's personal views, and now we left him with Spinoza. So he met Spinoza, but he didn't agree with Spinoza. He understood perfectly well the intentions of Spinoza and his premises and his basic teaching, but he disagreed with him. Well, Spinoza's argument was that if God could have created these possible worlds and didn't create them, then he is sort of not so omnipotent as he is. So that means that something is lacking in his omnipotence, in his power, because he could have created infinite number of worlds and he created only one of them. So for Spinoza, it was absurd. It was something derogative, not fit for this sublime idea of God. But with Leibniz and his idea of God choosing the best of all possible worlds, the solution, the answer is found. So he answers Spinoza in this way. Yes, God could have created these other worlds, but they are worse. They have more amount of evil and less amount of good. So they exist. These possibilities somehow exist in divine sort of mind, but are not realized because God foresaw or just wanted to create the optimal world. Okay, so that's why this is not that God choose this world out of infinite possibilities doesn't mean that God is not powerful enough, but that he's it means that he wants the best. And so we live in the best possible worlds, but other worlds are not excluded. So the freedom is safeguarded. So when we make a free action, we somehow choose one of the worlds. So after our free action, we somehow dies the possibility of another world, okay? But somehow we shouldn't be too nervous about that, because somehow God knows that even out of our evil actions, he will make something good. So somehow this joy of or laetitia of Spinoza is retained here. Well, maybe it's paradoxically, but here it is. So, for example, if I make a bad action, so it seems that the world becomes worse after my bad action. But I know that God already knew how I will act, and he already somehow compensated the results of my evil action, so that it is somehow neutralized, because the world in which I live is the best of all possible worlds. So somehow even I cannot spoil it, you understand. So in fact the result is very similar to the result of Spinoza, because in Spinoza's world you cannot spoil it, and in Leibniz's world you also cannot spoil it, because it's the best of all possible worlds. So you see, so that's why Catholic Church objected against Leibniz's thesis, because it somehow also somehow diminished the sense of guilt which is in every person. So I could say, well, not so directly as with Spinoza, that I feel no guilt because I couldn't have acted in another way. I have no freedom. But now I can say, in the case of Leibniz, I can say, well, I acted perhaps badly, but I shouldn't worry much, because God preordained it in such a way that my bad action will be neutralized, and out of this action will follow something good. Well, this kind of argument you can see later in the tragedy of Goethe, Faust. This is a celebrated tragedy written by famous poet, German poet Goethe. So there, Mephistopheles, when he is asked by Faust what is his name, he answers, I am part of that force that is always wanting to do something bad and always achieves something good. So you see, this devil, he wants to spoil everything, but God somehow tricks him or preordains everything in such a way as the devil cannot spoil the creation entirely, okay? So somehow devil or Satan is made impotent by the sort of infinite intelligence of God, okay? And this predestined harmony. So this is kind of a paradox. So you cannot spoil this best of all possible worlds, and this makes you also somehow free of this sense of guilt, okay? So you can say, well, maybe you shouldn't just judge me so severe, because you know, in fact, nothing very terrible, really terrible happened out of my action, because of my actions, okay? So this also something quite this sophistry is possible in this concept of Leibniz. So Catholic Church understood it, and so it's not, it didn't gain prominence with Catholic theologians. I mean, this Leibnizian idea. Well, this is the first half of our lecture, so we'll continue with Leibniz and his life after a short break, I think, yes? Because
Sir,
now...
I'll start the meeting again right now.
Yes, okay.
Yeah. Okay,
Very good.
with the same link.
Okay, very good. Let's continue. Now we have another theme. I promised you to tell you something about the disputation between Gottfried Leibniz and John Locke. So we haven't yet touched this English philosopher, John Locke, but I think now it is time to say a few words about him. Well, John Locke is a continuator of so-called British empiricism. He is well, his philosophy is in line with such English thinkers as Francis Bacon and Thomas Hobbes. Well, we didn't speak about Thomas Hobbes, unfortunately, because it pertains perhaps more to political science than to history and philosophy of science. But we spoke a lot about Francis Bacon, and we spoke about empirical tradition. So John Locke was also a representative of this empirical tradition, and he just went with, in his book on the nature of human understanding, he just, how to say, formulated the thesis that there is nothing in our mind that was not prior in our senses. So our mind, as John Locke put it, is an empty cabinet, which we sort of, by means of our senses, we sort of furnish it, okay, our empty cabinet. So there's nothing there. So what is the consequence of this thesis? The consequence is that education is everything. If we want to make a good child, we should educate him properly, because child can get these ideas of good and bad from nowhere except from his parents, from his surroundings, from his from the society, and so later there appears this typically British idea of Maugli. You understand Maugli? Kipling, Maugli. I'm not sure that this is written in this way, Maugli. Maybe not so. I'm not sure how it is written in with Kipling, because I know it only in Russian. So maybe I wrote it, I spelled it incorrectly. But you know about what I'm speaking, about a child who was brought up by wolves. And so he has no idea of like gentlemanly behavior, you see, because all these ideas are created by the environment. So all which I have from outside. Within me, within my soul, there is nothing. There is no sort of innate ideas. Well, this is Leibniz argued against that. For Leibniz, because we are monads, and this monad has freedom, and well, it was senseless for God to give a man freedom without giving some other inner qualities. Well, freedom is innate quality. So we have this freedom. Then we have this intelligence. We have our somehow ability to think logically. And that is laws of logic thinking are innate to us. We cannot but think logically. So this idea of innate principles will be very important later in the second semester when, if we continue, I don't know whether we'll continue in the second semester or not. I'm not sure. Maybe somebody knows whether we'll meet in February or it is only one semester of philosophy. But well, still maybe during our postgraduate studies, somewhere we'll meet the philosophy of Immanuel Kant, who will speak about our inner predispositions of our intellect, that our intellect cannot see the world otherwise than he really sees it. So it's like a software in the computer. So a computer, of course, receives. I'm sorry, just a moment. We'll continue. So with Kant, what do we have? We have, I said, with the software. This is a metaphor that our computer, of course, it can receive a lot of information from the internet, say, or from some disks or from other devices. Well, we can upload photos from our smartphone, for example. We can do thousands of things, but it is possible only as far as our computer is just not an iron, like iron brick, but something sophisticated. So our computer has this possibility of getting and storing this information. So our computer has something. It is not just blank page. Okay, it has some possibility of recognizing this information, saving this information, somehow processing this information. These are all that is somewhere there in the integral circuits somewhere. So the same with our mind. Of course, our mind can get a lot of information from outside. We can read books, we can see films, we can discourse, speak with each other, we can feel pain and feel joy. We can have thousands of feelings and emotions and perceptions, but we are not only perceptions, like say John Locke or later David Hume would say that our soul is a bundle of our ego is a bundle of perceptions. Not so. We have some inner personality which receives these perceptions, reacts to these perceptions, organizes these perceptions, but we are sort of, nevertheless, we are the boss of in our own say personality. We are in charge, we are responsible also, but we manage it. We manage this flow of consciousness, these perceptions. These are all in our power. So and also we have our brain, our mind has the possibility to get this information, to understand this information, and to produce another information that can be produced only by organized minds, not by just material creatures. So, well, when they say about artificial intelligence, of course, artificial intelligence can produce a lot of important information, but we cannot say that artificial intelligence is truly the boss, truly the person who can be responsible for his actions. If, say, a robot is driving a car and kills a pedestrian, he cannot be judged by the court, okay? Well, maybe a person can be judged who made this robot, okay? But well, if the computer writes an essay instead of you in philosophy and makes mistake, so this I give a mark to the computer, sort of, but I cannot say that the computer received an examination or passed the examination. Well, in some sense, well, like he passed some test of quality control, okay, but it is not personal. So that's why I am always against these impersonal relations with my students. I prefer just deal with persons and not just with items or with some, you understand, like graphs in the table, or well, you see, because it is according to Leibniz, it's a great treasure of ours that we possess, this personality, our freedom, our intellect, intelligence, and we shouldn't change it or profane it by some mechanistic approach. Well, and with Locke, seems that we are just uploaded with information, and the more we get, the better is our memory, the more great we are. Okay, so memory is all, or memory, or say quality of our senses. For example, if I am short-sighted, for example, I'm worse than a man who can see very well. Okay, because for Locke, all the information we get from our senses. If our senses are impeded, for example, lack of hearing, lack of vision, or blindness, for example, or stupidity in the sense that our memories fails us, then we are like not important people, because our personalities somehow our personality is somehow formed by our senses and by our memory. So if our memory is not very well, not very good, and if our senses are deficient in some way, then we are less persons. When with Leibniz, it's not so. With Leibniz, even a blind man, or even a man deaf man, for example, or a man with some not very good memory, can still be a bright personality, because he can come into contact with his creator and receive some grace or some power directly from God. So, and he already received it in the act of creation. So this, for example, dignity of man is received in the act of creation. It's not that we are, say, our dignity depends on the volume of our memory, for example, or on the, say, our ability to see, well, somehow lack of short-sightedness, our good vision doesn't, well, of course it can be used by us, but it's not all. Well, the most important things happen somewhere deep in our souls. This is the idea of Leibniz. That's why he calls a man a monad. So a monad comes from monos. It's in Greek one. So we are individuals. So we are not dependent. Well, of course, we somehow what we get can somehow change us, but we can also organize these changes and react to the environment. And for even if we have, say, adverse environment, we can somehow retain our inner, say, qualities or our inner values in spite of all that is happening around us. Okay, so this was um, uh, the issue of this dispute between Locke and Leibniz. So Leibniz wrote in French. He used French sometimes, not Latin. He wrote in French the answer to John Locke. John Locke wrote in English, but Leibniz wanted to be understood in not only in England but on the continent also. Well, I'm not sure if maybe he didn't know English so well as to answer in English, but I think it was done on purpose. All the most important works of Leibniz were written in French, including his main work. I think one of his work, this Theodicy. Well, and now just after this sort of disputation with Locke, we return again to Theodicy. This is now we have to speak of, this was published in 1710. So it was like a crown of Leibniz activity. So because Leibniz died shortly afterwards, he died in 1716. So the Theodicy is like the book in which Leibniz expressed all his most dear thoughts. And it is a bulky book. If monadology is a short treatise, a collection of some theses, then Theodicy is a big book. So you can read it, of course, in English and in French, in the original. It was translated even into Latin and into German and into Russian. So now what is the title of this book? This is a new word which is somehow invented by Leibniz himself. This word did not exist before Leibniz. It is formed out of two Greek words, theos, which means God in Greek, and dike. Dike is in Greek justice. So what is that to make God just? Well, this is, we can translate it as a justification of God. Well, justification from what? From certain accusations. So God is accused that he is not merciful enough, that he is not sort of compassionate enough. And then we shall somehow answer this accusation and justify God. This is the idea of Leibniz. So God is justified by that he chose the best of all possible worlds. So this is his justification. He did what he could in the circumstances of in which he in which we are all situated. So, of course, God could have created us without free will and so necessarily good. Maybe this world would be better, but it is not, it is not so obvious, because if we lacked free will, then we lacked truly human personality. And with Leibniz, it was a deficiency. So absence of freedom is a deficiency. So if we don't have freedom, means that we are slaves. Well, we are not slaves, say, of other men, but we are slaves of this like law of necessity. So Leibniz thought that this slavery is not somehow cannot be sort of connected with compatible with human dignity. So this is freedom is like some kind of a gift that makes man a personality. And with freedom comes the possibility of the abuse of freedom. So when you are, for example, you are given a driver's license, you receive some like power. Well, if theoretically speaking, of injuring other people and their cars, for example, injuring yourself also. So with free will, we are also given kind of a driver's license, only not the car, just mechanically speaking, but we are driving ourselves, our personality. We can injure other people, we can make some bad things, bad actions, which will spoil many things. Well, I've already discussed this idea that, of course, we can say that God will somehow save the world in spite of our bad intentions. But these our bad intentions injure not only the world, but first of all, our own personality. This again, I return to this idea, Indian idea of karma. So by our evil intentions, we injure not so much other people, because God provides that our evil intentions will not be fully realized by his predetermined harmony. But we injure ourselves, and here God can do nothing. So we are sort of becoming worse and worse. And well, that's the pity of it. But we cannot do anything, because we cannot change the evil intentions of other human beings. So if they are evil, they will remain evil, and nothing can be done. Well, of course, we can show them example, but not everybody is moved by other people's examples. Or the less probability is that we can move people to become good by our words. People are not listening to preachers now, especially. Well, maybe in former ages, when people were mostly ignorant and illiterate, they had some, how so to say, simple people, simple workers, simple peasants. They had some appreciation, some regard, some esteem to educated people. And when educated people came to them, be they Brahmins or be they Catholic priests or missionaries, or say just saints, we can say like St. Francis of Assisi, their example could move those simple, ignorant people, illiterate people. But already in the story that what is told in the Gospels about Jesus Christ, we can understand how Jesus Christ somehow had no power to move the souls of the educated classes, the Pharisees, okay, those in power. Those people, and if we say even if Jesus Christ couldn't move them or make them better, then who can? So our possibilities are limited. So that's according to Leibniz, this is the problem of man himself. Of course, his evil nature cannot be somehow change the world and make it very evil. Somehow God will provide for that, but it can injure and kill maybe his own personality. So here we have some affinity, I think, between the philosophy of Leibniz and Eastern philosophies. Well, maybe even there is something also connected with the Islamic teaching of divine justice. Well, I think Leibniz is maybe interesting, and his work may be interesting because it has some parallels with the great classics of, say, Hinduism or Buddhism or Islam. Well, Leibniz himself was more interested in Chinese philosophy. At that time, the first missionaries, mostly Jesuits, who visited China, brought, found and brought to Europe the the masterpieces of Chinese philosophy. So for the first time, Europe was acquainted with such names as Confucius, yes, and Laozi. Okay, so and well, not with Leibniz perhaps himself, but also we can of course study the influence of Chinese philosophy on Leibniz. But I would say the more probable case of this influence is with the pupil of Leibniz, Christian Wolff, a German philosopher. Christian Wolff. He was certainly influenced by Chinese thought. And Christian Wolff was the teacher of Russian student Lomonossov, who came to Marburg University to study there Lomonossov. You know Lomonossov, who he is the first Russian scientist and also kind of a philosopher and a poet. He was sent to Europe to study philosophy and natural sciences, and Christian Wolff was his mentor and tutor and coach, I would say. He helped him even with his money because Lomonossov was poor at that time. So Christian Wolff showed just very much compassion and interest in these Russian students, among which was Lomonossov. And now Moscow University is named after Lomonossov. So you see here's a connection between Leibniz through Wolff to Russia. Also, Leibniz was a friend of Russian Tsar Peter the Great. They met several times, and Leibniz was very much elated with the prospects of Peter the Great to educate his country, to found academies and universities, to promote science and technology in Russia, because Leibniz understood that this is the very important. And here we can see that Leibniz's idea of the best of all possible worlds was also the idea of enlightened world. He didn't think that the best of all possible worlds is the world of ignorant people. That's otherwise he wouldn't have praised Peter the Great, because in Russia itself, many people were against Peter the Great because he was somehow leading Russia away from its traditions. And the opponents of Peter the Great said that we don't need Western education, Western ideas. We don't want this because we are we should be true to our Russian traditions, to our Russian customs, and we don't need this Western influence. Well, for Leibniz, there was no such thing as German, say, traditions or English traditions or Russian traditions. You understand that Leibniz worked in in the field of ideas where there's nothing national and sort of narrow. Well, he was, of course, the citizen of Hanover, and well, he can also be called an Englishman because his sovereign was the king of England. So Hanover and England were in kind of a union, because when George I became a king of England, he didn't just abjure or cease to be the king of Hanover. So Leibniz was we can call him an Englishman also, or English citizen. So all inhabitants of Hanover became kind of British citizens at that time. But this doesn't just characterize Leibniz in any way. He was a German, but he wrote either in Latin or in French. Of course, when for example, he went to visit Spinoza, who was a Jew, for example. So with Leibniz, there were no like national ambitions. Also, he was Lutheran, but he was very much influenced by Catholic theologians and esteemed very much Catholicism. Well, if you are needed fast exam, that will be nice. But as far as Masha Kaplina told me, you will have your exam in January, not in December. So only bioinformatics have their exam on December. So and only a few students, and I already put them these marks. So other groups will wait for January. So don't be afraid. All is under control in this best of all possible places of higher education, as is Moscow Institute of Physics and Technology. So we also have, intention to achieve the best results. Okay, so you shouldn't be worried. We will discuss everything. Of course, I can answer your emails and WhatsApp messages. So everything, I'm very much like open to discussions and to different opportunities. Well, just to finish with Peter the Great and with the cosmopolitan character of Leibniz. So Leibniz was in this way a man of no nationality and no national prejudices. So, and that's why he esteemed Peter the Great's idea of introducing, well, we say Western. Yes, of course, we can say Western. Western means European. Western means white. Western means like Christian. So it is like a supremacy of white Christian, Protestant, or Catholic culture over all other cultures. Not so. Leibniz was thinking in categories of God, who is not white nor black, in category of human person, which he didn't define as white or Protestant. So then he's speaking about freedom, which is also above all just petty national or historical circumstances. Also, he when he entered in, say, disputation with Locke, they were also speaking about intelligence as such, about human soul as such, not about English or German soul, okay? Well, when I said that maybe Locke was influenced by English empiricism, well, that's perhaps a limitation, but I think Leibniz was free of that limitation. Well, so I think he was a man like for all seasons, okay, like we say about St. Thomas More. So I think that makes Leibniz a good character for just my lecture, because I know that you are of different cultures and well, of different convictions perhaps. But I think Descartes here and Leibniz and maybe Spinoza also somehow paradoxically can have a kind of value which transcends just European influence, that it can be appreciated by all. As far as we also Europeans can appreciate the treasures of Chinese philosophy or Indian philosophy or Muslim philosophy, and even we can say African philosophy. Well, African philosophy is difficult to say, but I appreciate precious, like precious features of African character. For example, great empathy and great emotionally sort of, I would say, emotionally gifted, I think, people from Africa. As far as I have their acquaintances, I'm acquainted with some Africans before especially with Sisters of Mother Teresa, who were working in Moscow and coming from Kenya and Tanzania and other countries. So I can form a very, very positive idea of African also character. And well, I think Leibniz will go for Africa also. So I think that this is not in vain. So if we'll have continuation, then we'll start also Immanuel Kant, who is also a man above all petty and little national or religious or some other limitations. And then we'll speak about Hegel, who is also like above all differences, and maybe we'll also speak about Goethe a little bit more. So we have a lot of plans, but now we have to finish it. And I wish you a happy Christmas and happy New Year, and remain safe and sound. And yes, okay. So we'll meet, of course, and you can attend my lectures from any place you want. So there are no limitations here. So goodbye, everybody. Thank Aljasvini for hosting us, and remain healthy. And now I wish you every success. Okay, goodbye. Goodbye. Yes.
Goodbye. Thank you
Goodbye.
so much.
Thank